Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray, your weekly fix of ancient warfare-related rant by me, based on the questions that you send in, whether by postcard or email or by comment on a previous video, a previous podcast. You can join us on Patreon and send your questions that way. There's 3 different levels that you can back us at. You just need to go to patreon.com/ancient warfare podcast, and that will get hold of us. You can back us at $1, $5, and $10, Legionary, Optio, and Centurion. Even get a copy of the magazine. So what you do is send me questions. I attempt to answer them in 10 minutes if I can, but that's not guaranteed. Now, this is from Dylan Thomas. I won't go gentle into that. Good night. Hey, mate. Recently found your channel, and I'm really enjoying your work. Thank you, Dylan. I'm curious about the early life of Marcus Furius Camillus. He seems to pop up during the siege of Veii in Livy's work with few mentions beforehand, and is then a very important figure going forward. Are there any primary sources that recount his early life and career? The man's a legend, easily top 10 Romans of all time, but there seems to be scant records of him unless I am just too uneducated to know better. Can you help with this at all? Not uneducated at all, Dylan, and you've pretty much hit it on the head that when Camillus does emerge into Roman history, so the best sources are indeed Livy and the life of Camillus and Plutarch. So, and we do have some other anecdotal evidence, but that's the best of them. Now, the interesting thing about all of that is we're told explicitly by Plutarch that Camillus is of an ancient patrician family, the Furi Camilli, originally from the Latin city of Tusculum, which had allied with Rome in the early 5th century BC. And then, even though his father is Pontifex Maximus, he's the first member of his family to come to fame. And so we're told that there isn't much to know about the family before him. As you pointed out, we are relatively uninformed about his early life, and he pops up in the account of Rome's conflict with the Volsci to the south in 431 BC, which is in both Camillus and books 4, 5, and 6 of Livy. Now, the interesting thing, of course, about Camillus is that he probably born in 435 down to 535 down to 465. Oh, I'm getting my 4s and my 5s wrong. So he's born in I can't even say it right. Yes, 446 to 365. I did have it right. No, I put the wrong numbers in. Sorry. So born in 446 down to 365. Right. Now I'm on track. So he's got a very long life. In that long life, he does a remarkable amount of things. Of course, one of the things we've got is the Camillan reforms of the Roman army. Those tend to now be rejected as a set of reforms for which Camillus is responsible. They don't really fit. And so it's like the reforms of Marius that are now, it's a process. Marius is just one part of that process. It's not all Marius's responsibility. So too with the Camillan reforms, that's a process and an evolution of the Roman army in the 4th century BC, and Camillus may have been part of that, but he certainly isn't responsible for all of it. And so we get to that. Now, as I said, he comes to prominence in the Roman victory against the Aequi and the Volsci at a battle fought at Mount Algidus, under the command of a dictator, Aulus Postumius Tubertus, in 431. That's why he can't be born in 435, because he would have been 4 years old. Interestingly, what you then get, of course, is Camillus's rise in fame. And perhaps the most interesting thing about Camillus, of course, is he never holds the consulship. Again, part of the period is what was known as the conflict of the orders, where the plebeians and the patricians warred against one another. The plebeians wanted more representation and enfranchisement in the Roman system, and the patricians resisted. So you get all of that, which is a very long period of early Republican and mid-Republican history. And Camillus is slap bang in the middle of it. And so it's gone out of favor today. People don't like talking about the conflict of the orders. Seems to be an invention of a series of legislations which are decades apart. The first plebeian consul, the tribune of the plebs, and things like that. But one of the interesting things about Plutarch's Life of Camillus is that he explicitly states that he didn't want to hold the consulship because of the political conditions at the time. And he basically sums that up, saying that the common people were at variance with the Senate, and they strove against the appointment of consuls because they could only be patricians at the time, and they therefore elected military tribunes to the command instead. These, although they had always acted with consular authority and power, were less obnoxious in their sway because of their number. For the number, there were six military tribunes rather than, six elected military tribunes rather than the two consuls. And so Camillus refuses to hold the consulship over a people who were reluctant to condone such an office, which is fascinating for what he achieves for Rome through not being a consul. So in this first battle where he comes to prominence in 431 BC, he's serving in the cavalry and charges the enemy despite being wounded in the thigh already. And according to Plutarch, he was elected censor in reward for this. Now, that's another one of those problems with our sources. He's not eligible to be censor because he hasn't been consul. He's not elected censor until 403 BC, so 28 years after this battle. So it's unlikely that that was the reason he got elected. It's one of those things about a moral biography by Plutarch, which is like, well, it's not a historical source. We need to be very careful to use it as such. The argument being that at the battle, by being wounded and continuing to fight, Camillus showed Romanitas, the embodiment of Romanitas. And so that then led to him being elected censor to enlist the men in the army because they were going to be Romans, and having shown such great moral qualities, he was going to select men for the army with the same qualities. It's a very moral, a bit murky when it comes to the actual historical facts about that. Then he fights against Veii in 406 and is elected one of the military tribunes during that long campaign. Veii, at the time, in the late 5th century, is the most important city that Rome is fighting against. It's the sort of the bulwark of the region, and it is Camillus who is responsible for taking it. Now, the interesting thing about Camillus, and all of this stuff comes out of a book that I wrote that hasn't been published, so you're not missing anything, on the Battle of the Allia, which is 390 BC or 386 BC, we're not sure, the great loss that Rome suffers against the Senones Gallic tribe, and then the sacking of Rome and the siege of the Capitol. Interestingly, of course, Camillus isn't involved in that. He's been exiled, but he comes back to Rome and is summoned back to Rome in the aftermath when the Gauls are camped out in the ruins of Rome and besieging the remaining Romans on the Capitol. So he comes to power after that and saves Rome, but he's not actually there during Rome's great defeat, either at the Allia or at the taking of the city itself. So in a way, it's one of those sort of lessons for the Romans that their greatest strength at the time, by their own and on their own responsibility, they had banished him. And so that's one of those issues. So you've got Camillus, and then of course what you then get are the Camillan reforms after that. So the interesting thing about Roman warfare and how it evolves is, when do the Camillan reforms come in? When do they start fighting in these different ways? We've got two descriptions. One is, of course, Livy, and the other one is Polybius. And so we've got bits of other evidence in Plutarch and elsewhere which don't quite fit. Similarly, the number of men in the legion was 6, goes down to 4, goes up to 3, 2, but there are different numbers at different times, which makes it look like it's not actually a set number. It's a number that reflects what the situation was regarded as. Was it, how threatening was it? And so in many ways, the number of men we're given levied for a legion alters for the next few decades. So it's very hard to say that there's one system in place that you cannot argue with when we have these different numbers. And the other problem, of course, is that we take those numbers as gospel, and so that's a problem as well. So you've got that. The fall of Veii, as I said, is Camillus as a dictator in 396. So it's a very long campaign from the late 5th into the 4th centuries, but it's fascinating. I've already got talked for 10 minutes. So you've got Camillus emerging as a patrician of long family, but no real famous members of the family, despite the fact that his father is the Pontifex Maximus. And then essentially he wipes the floor with all future members of his family because he's Camillus. He comes to prominence as a soldier, as a cavalryman, interestingly, even in Roman context. And then he emerges as a military tribune and holds that command multiple times to basically lead the Roman armies to great victories in Veii. Then he's banished, and Rome suffers its worst defeat, and he's brought back, and he won't come back until the Senate asks him to. So he's very Roman and very proper in that. And then, of course, he leads Rome's recovery after the defeat at the hands of the Senones in 390 BC. So everything else about Camillus needs to happen on another day. Join me again for another Ancient Warfare Answers. Thanks. Bye.